All right, we've got it for another minute or so. Any questions off the floor? Anybody? At this point, no? All right, I think we'll pick it up later. Thanks very much. So we move on now to the first of our panel sessions, and understandably it's focused around the water crisis. So for the next while, I'm going to ask our panelists to engage around the issue, and there'll be a chance for some questioning at the end of it. Ensuring business continuity, how are events responding, and that's in light of this water crisis, because it could be quite crippling and quite paralyzing under certain circumstances. So the person who will be chairing this discussion, I'm going to ask him to step forward. Solly Fourie, he's already been introduced. He's head of department with the economic development. Yes, we need you up here though. Okay, they're fantastic. They're behind the screen. So maybe they'll have their panel discussion at the back there and we can listen in on it. We've also got Mr. Glenn Broomberg, he's head of race operations with the Absa Cape Epic. There's David Valles, director of the Cape Town Cycle to a Trust. We've got Ms. Carol Vosloo as the MD of the Two Oceans Marathon, and Janet Willem, who's the director of the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon. So if I can ask each of the panelists, when they're ready, to please take their seats. Yeah, there we go. All right, round of applause. They finally have joined us. Fantastic. Okay, they've already concocted their answers. I suppose that's how it goes. Okay. Solly, all yours, mate?
Yes, thank you very much. Am I on? Get ourselves sorted. Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going into a session now where we're going to have a panel discussion around water safety and water security, and particularly from our 4B events. And South African Rugby Board guys we're going to be here, but I don't think he pitched. Is Marlon's not here? No, okay, so Marlon's not here. I just wanted to make sure. So as Aidan has said, I'm Solly Fourie. I head up the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. I report directly to Alan, who's at Cabinet this morning. And our role as a department is essentially to look at the whole of an economy approach. Of course, events and linked to our tourism strategy are very important for us, and we support it very, very strongly. Water and tourism is a big issue for me, because we've had a couple of murmurs that say, well, you shouldn't get the tourists into your city. Effectively, tourists only make up less than 1% of the population of the city, and they're not going to use all our water, so please don't listen to that message. Let the tourists come. But I've got with me this morning Glenn Broomberg, Head of Operations for Absa Cape Epic. I've got David Valles on Glenn's left-hand side. David is the director of the Cape Town Cycle to a Trust. I've got Carol Vosloo, MD of the Two Oceans Marathon, and we've got Janet Wellman, director of Sanlam Cape Town Marathon. So welcome, panelists, and thank you very much for being here. The topic for our 45 minutes is the challenges that water security brings to large events, and to also understand the response of these large events to the water crisis and to water security. I'm going to give, between Janet and Carol, the girls have sorted themselves out. They got a presentation, they read the script. The guys, I mean, I don't know, it's strangely. But between Janet and Carol, they're going to do a presentation. It's going to come on the screen, hope it's loaded. If you guys have got it, you can flash it up there. Is it ready? You guys got it? Okay, it's going to come up. But I think maybe, while we're waiting for that, Glenn, if you can start with you, just a brief introduction, who you are, what are you doing, and et cetera, et cetera.
Sure, so my name is Glenn Broomberg. I'm the head of race operations for the Absa Cape Epic, as well as the event director for the UCI World Cup that's currently still in March. Obviously, part of my primary focus is all operations relating to the events, of which Water is the primary one, being a completely self-sustained event that caters full catering, full service to over 2,500 people on a daily basis for 8 days over 5 different locations. Obviously, water for us is a vital part for both sustainability of the event, the riders, and the crew. So we've had to look at many aspects when it comes to water not being a one-day event or being in one location. I think there we go, you're up.
Yeah, but let's go through, Dave, a quick introduction.
Okay, very quickly, Dave Perez. I've been involved with the Cape Town Cycle Tour, previously the Argus Cycle Tour, Argus Pick and Pay Cycle Tour. We'll stop there because the names go on. For about 27 years. Obviously for us, the environment has been a very big part of the event. From when we commissioned our very first environmental management plan some 22 years ago. We were one of the first events to really undertake and understand that the environment and the environmental sustainability was key to the success of the event and the future of the event. And we take the whole water issue extremely seriously. We'll obviously get into that a little bit later.
Okay, cool, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to both Carol and Janet. I don't know who's going to lead, but I'll leave it over to you. And your presentation is up there.
Thank you. Just from our side, Karen and I had a long discussion previously at the end of last week, and we felt, given that we were representing two running events with fairly similar types of problems as it related to water and everything associated with sustainability, we felt that we would have a combination presentation because we do collaborate quite extensively through the two events with regard to common problems and common problem solving. So I'll leave it to Carol to start.
Thank you, Janet, and I think that's a key point is that as major events in the city, we do collaborate a lot because it's important that we work together. There's no use us implementing one school of thought and then specifically on the runner side, and I think we all know that we right now have a plastics issue, which is very important in terms of our sustainability as well. And as a race and an event, we can't implement one set of rules and then a runner could go and run Cape Town Marathon and then a different set of rules apply. So, and we spoke about earlier on, is that making sure that this becomes the new norm and it changes the behavior of people. So we do work together a lot. It's very important that we support each other. Could you go to the next slide, please? So we've also spoken about that these practices need to become the new norm, and it's not that we're just in this drought crisis situation, but everything we do, and specifically as major events, we're very high profile. It's a fun activity for people to be involved in, but it's very serious, and it's a great platform for us to communicate with our runners and cyclists and other people partaking in the events in the city. We need to also do things differently and lead by example, and people behavior is followed, and if they are forced to do something in a specific way, it needs to continue and lead by example. We've spoken a lot about being socially and environmentally responsible events, and the economic impact study specifically plays a part to this, and the Old Mutual Two Oceans Marathon was looked into last year as a case study, and the event brings in 672 million rand just over the weekend. So this year when we opened our entries and our ultra marathon was sold out in a record 2 days, which is just unbelievable for a 56k ultra event, extreme event. A lot of people said to us, how can you run this event? We don't know what's going to be happening with the water. March is a particularly busy month. We've got Epic, we've got Cycle Tour, we've got ourselves, we've got Jazz Festival, and a number of other events. But we've also had to explain to our runners that it's the importance of this event that brings into the city. 70% of our ultra runners come from outside the Western Cape. So it's very important that we embark on a comms plan, which we will come to later.
Okay, so from our side, one of the big pillars of our marathon, or one of the big key objectives of the marathon, is to use the event to leverage change. And we have what we call the Run for Change Legacy program, which we introduced in 2015. It has 5 pillars, and one of those pillars is sustainability in particular. And this year in particular, we have just come back from Greece, having won the International Ames Green Award, which makes us the greenest marathon on the planet. and certainly, you know, when we were in Greece, one of the key aspects associated with that, they said, what did you look at and what was that about? And you know, I'm not going to bore you with the actual sustainability plan and how we implemented it, but it went from everything from measurements in its context of our carbon footprints and every other level that is associated with sustainability, all the way through to implementation. And we are a certified climate neutral event. And from that, we also introduced the Run Green campaign in 2015, reintroduced it again more extensively in 2016, and then again in 2017, which is really around taking action and people reducing, after we've measured everything, we obviously have to go on a campaign of reduction. And what does that really mean? Reduction, reusing, recycling, and everything else associated with it. As Carol indicated, in the running industry, our plastic sachets is a big no-no, and obviously the plastics issue is fundamentally a part to that, and not littering. Measuring and offsetting our travel carbon footprints. So when we talk about carbon offsetting, we look at that in its entirety, and then sharing all the challenges and communicating those challenges across the platform of comms that we do have. But the cleanup is very, very critical, and if we had to say what was the key critical level that we managed to do this, get this award, was the fact that we actually managed to not put 1 kilogram of waste into landfill this year. And certainly, you know, not only are we climate neutral, not only do we offset our carbon footprint in its entirety, but we did not put 1 piece of waste into the planet this year, and that was really, really quite an extensive campaign. But obviously the real focus of today, which is one pillar to the sustainability, is that of water.
Yeah, and just further to what Janet's saying is that we embarked with our title sponsor and Wildlands Trust, the Go Green campaign, and I think basically what this is also showing is how events like us can use these platforms, and it's all about education. So with us, these little plastic sachets, it's not only the sachet that could blow off chappies into the sea, but it's the little corners that runners bite off when they're running, and those corners end up in the sea, in the drains, where animals and birds are picking up those bits of plastic. So really the indication is that we can make a difference as events, and I think this year we're all going to be concentrating on the water crisis issue. You can just scroll through that. So we've already started planning, and I know my colleagues are also desperately planning for next year. We need to look at all the elements that are associated with water and review of what's set out by the Federation. And I know Janet has been through this because they were doing level 5 crisis mode.
Yes, absolutely. So one of our, obviously, my colleagues here are going into level 5, their events in March.
Level 6.
Level 6, sorry, you got level 6, I had level 5. So from our side, we were in level 5 when we had our event in September, at the end of September. So we had to really back very, very smartly with regard to identification of the areas where water was used, and work out measures of reduction. So the aspects associated with things like toilet showers, VIP catering areas, sachets and other alternatives, and then cooling stations. And what we implemented there was very specific to, obviously once we've identified where the water is, how do we reduce that water, if not eliminate the usage. So from the toilets perspective, we didn't use any normal communal toilets that have water mains. We only used chemical toilets, so we closed all the doors, locked all the doors to any communal toilets that use water. The second thing is we did not have showers, much to the distress of many of the marathoners that were there, but we did communicate that going forward. With our VIP catering, previous years we've had water sources to mains, to most of our VIP areas, our bars are, and so on and so forth. And this year we actually only had 1 tap to mains. So there was a huge aspect associated with our partners, working with our partners with regard to how they needed to bring non-potable water and use non-potable water where they could, for the washing of their dishes and so on and so forth. The sachets we'll come to in a different thing, and we didn't have cooling stations, much to the distress of many of the runners. Afterwards, we had much negative feedback with regard to not having cooling stations, but we didn't have cooling stations. And certainly that was something that we looked at quite extensively.
So all the events that are going to take place from now on have been briefed by the city, and we obviously have had a lot of discussions with them. We've already had a water crisis workshop with Dr. Wayne Smith and talking about all these elements. A lot of stuff that's unknown to us because that's not our core business. But we will be bringing in water from outside the affected areas. We need to ensure that we maintain the ecosystem. We spoke about that earlier on in terms of the trees and the roots, etc. And we're working very closely with our sponsors and our partners. And I won't go into too much detail because Dan will be presenting next from PenBev. And I know David's been speaking to him as well because we face similar problems. So it's a collaborated approach that we need to make sure that we all implement together with our partners. So if you want to look at that.
Yeah, so obviously the second part of the water usage in particular came around the routes and the water tables. We are dictated by international federations, South African federations and local federations with regard to the number of water tables that we have to have en route and the number of sachets per athlete per water station. And obviously one of the biggest challenges that we face is, okay, so we've got to abide by these laws, but we have got these restrictions that are placed on us. So we've acted really, really cleverly with regard to the water distribution across the tables, the water tables, and we had so many water sachets per water station, and many of the people that are in this room were part of the redistribution of the water going forward. And at the end of the race, we only had half a bucky load of sachets left, because one of the biggest problems with water sachets along a race, for instance, is that many of them don't get used, and then you sit with many of these full sachets of water that you actually just waste. We took those, that's half a sachet, half a bucky of sachets to the Haven here just down the road, where we actually donated it to them. The rest of the stuff, we didn't have any spare water. It was just that simple.
What we've done from the Old Mutual Two Oceans Marathon point of view, in collaboration with looking at the plastics problem, is asked runners to indicate if they'll run with a hydration pack next year, which is a pretty mean feat to run 56 Ks in this heat, specifically for international runners and other runners who don't know our climate. So we've had over 6,000 positive responses, which is great, but that does provide other challenges because we now have to accommodate for that. We have to bring in the big tankers, we have to make sure we've got enough pressure for the water distribution, and I know Dave will talk to that as well. So there certainly are ways, and once again, it's all going back to that behavioural change.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to go all of that is really the pre-communications and education, which is key to the focus of the usage of water, in our opinion. Because as much as I was saying to Dave early on, we had when we realized we're going into level 5 water restrictions into our race, how do we get athletes to change their behavior? And if you had to say to us, what is our biggest challenge, it's just that. What is the challenge the city and the Western Cape government is facing is how do you change people, general laymen on the street. So it really is behavioral changes. And if you had to say to me, what is our biggest challenge, that is it. The communication to get people to take responsibility for the use of their own water and change their behaviors. And that was really, really the fundamental.
And we will commence from January with a very targeted campaign. We have a database of all our runners who've entered the race. But as much as we can tell people, and I'll just use Gauteng as an example, unless you're living here, unless you're in the situation, and I think that happened with the fires as well, unless you were here going through this whole process, you don't really have a grasp of it. You arrive from Johannesburg, yes, the aeroplanes are announcing there's a water shortage. You go into the airport, there's signs everywhere. We spoke to a sponsor yesterday from Johannesburg who said, yes, I see the signs all over the hotels, but I still just quickly want to have a longer shower. Or I flush the chain because that's habit. Whereas we're getting into that habit of where maybe we don't have to flush the chain all the time, or we actually don't, because we heard that toilets take up a huge amount of water. So really it's making sure that it's very targeted comms and high profile, top of mind awareness.
You guys, because I just wanted to check what the guys were thinking about all of this. I mean, you guys are sitting there very quietly. I mean, do you have responses to this?
No, I think, it's what are on these slides exactly what would be done in our slides. I mean, it really comes down to a number of key things. First and foremost, and Janet, you touched on it, is as an event, you need to understand what water you're using, and I think you touched on it earlier in your presentation. Understand your water footprint, because before you can address anything, you need to know exactly where it is. And Janet, you had in that slide exactly what I would have had. It isn't just about the water that's being consumed by the cyclists or the runners or your participants on the day. It's about the dishes that are being washed in the VIP area. It's about the water that you used to wash your hands with that you're now using hand sanitizer. It's about using chemical toilets and not water flushing toilets. So it's all there. But until you understand what your water usage is, it's very difficult to address the issue. And I think that is first and foremost.
Absolutely, and I think then the second key part is the educational part. And education is not just for foreigners coming into the country, it's for, as you quite rightly said, people living as close as Johannesburg, who live under completely different circumstances. They don't quite understand the severity of the water restrictions and the lack of water in the Cape. So for us, it was clearly understanding our footprint over the course of a week, over 5 different locations, over 4 different municipalities that have different levels of water restrictions. So we're sitting in Cape Town, we'll be in level 6. When we're sitting out in Wellington or Robertson, we're probably sitting on a level 2 or level 4. But we have an obligation as an event to have a responsible reaction, no matter what the level of restriction is in that area. We can't suddenly go to Robertson and say, well, now we're on level 2, so we go crazy. We need to have a standard level of operation across the event, which speaks directly to the severe situation that I think that the Cape is currently facing.
I think the key is events is that this is a new way of doing events.
Yeah.
This is not something that's going to be here for as long as we've got water restrictions. This is going to be something that we need to implement on an ongoing basis. This is a precious resource. We need to treat it like that. It has been a fascinating exercise for us. It really has, and we identified water as far back as 2016 as being an issue. We all have the same pillars. Environmental sustainability is one of those, and water obviously sits now at the very top of that. And it's been fascinating understanding. You guys have the challenge of how many water points you have to have. We don't have that delegation down from the International Cycling Union, so we're able to tailor it a little better. But it's behavioural change. It's getting people not to fill their water bottles up at home this year when they come to the cycle tour, because we're going to have tankers at the start. So you'll fill your water bottle up before you load in the start chutes, and that water is going to come from outside the province. So it's making sure that people understand that behavioural change.
I want to just touch on something that I think it was either Janet or Carol mentioned, and this is this issue of uniform rules and how the Two Oceans and the Sundance Cape Town Marathon, how you've got a uniform kind of protocol, I would almost call it, for the utilization of water. Would that be difficult to spread between all 4 of the events that they have?
I think our uniformity is more of a collaborative approach, and Carol and I speak fairly regularly about common problems that we have and working out how to solve them as best we can. And I certainly believe that yes, that would be something that we could not just spread from here, we could spread into the whole of the Western Cape and South Africa for that matter. There's certainly key learnings that we have.
The uniformity of the rules that we should be doing is there. I think it would just be up to each event for the application to take the uniformity of that rule and apply it in the situation it speaks to one day or a limited area or spread out area. But the essence of the rules would all be the same: conservation of water and kind of the education around the use of water.
No, we as marathons run under Western Province Athletics and in turn ASA and IAAF ruling, where internationally you need to have a refreshment station every 5 Ks. And we have spoilt our runners. Conditions are different here because of the heat. But and sometimes due to the geography and the layout, we've had water stations more frequently. So we certainly are re-looking at those depending on the land available. We also need to appreciate and consider sandparks in terms of running across their lands where we have feeding stations. So we have been generous, but I think it's also time now to re-look at that, as long as we communicate that to our runners beforehand.
I want to come to an issue which I think affects all 4 of these events, and that's the issue of water and health. Water and the runner or the participant or the cyclist's attitude towards their own health, their own facing of an event, and their dependence upon water. Where's that debate going? Is it something you guys are getting into? And it's really part of my question about behavioral psychology, behavioral change.
So I'm getting, there was a conversation that took place around the back, which doesn't take place often enough at major sporting events. Glenn raised it. Tim Noakes, a number of years ago, made the statement that there is no documented medical evidence at a mass participation sporting event in the world of a death from dehydration. There have been numerous documented cases of death by what they call
Overfilling yourself with water.
So it isn't, to your earlier question, sorry, it is for us as major events to be educating our participants with the help of our medical partners to the use of water and liquids during an event. One doesn't need to overhydrate. And I know certainly at ultra events like the Cape Epic and the ultra marathons, people do tend to overcompensate. And that's more of a problem than underhydrating. I know Bruce Fordhouse always used to say that you could actually survive on very little Coke and water and run a Comrades Marathon. So one has to be very careful in what you're recommending people drink en route. And in actual fact, at the cycle tours, we'll be reducing the number of water points because we believe in, when Renee, who's sitting in the audience, was still with the cycle tour, we cut back then because we had far too many water points and people were stopping too often and drinking too often. It's not necessary.
I think it's a natural reaction from a person when the heat goes up that they want to hydrate. And you know, this year's Cape Epic, we had the first 2 days of 40 degree plus and massive humidity. And to directly speak to Dave's point, we didn't have many cases of dehydration, but we had a number of cases of overhydration. So the person's natural instinct is to drink. And that's where our responsibility is education, and proper and meaningful education of what you actually need to get through from one point to the next point.
Now, Glenn, I think to add on to that, we've had a debate internally with regard to, we have sachets obviously in running, and how much of that sachet is used to cool versus how much of the sachet is actually used to drink. It is our opinion, and it's not based on any scientific evidence other than photography, that we think about 2/3 of the actual sachets water is for cooling, and only about 1/3 of the sachets water is for drinking. And we will be putting measurements in place to evaluate that particular question, because we do believe then if you could almost put a cooling station that had some form of rotational water that could be used non-potable, that was just a cooling station, that just before each water station you would probably reduce the use of water quite extensively going into the water station. So that's something we are reviewing for 2008.
And I think another thing is us. You know, and Dan will talk to this too, is using grey water for us, which we use to cool down, say, the Coca-Cola bottles or Powerade. But then people might also take that us to refresh themselves. So we need to have that balance between where we use non-potable water and other water. And to that, from the other point of view, is that as marathons, we go through a very stringent process with our service provider, K3 Water, to make sure that the water is purified, that we test it at certain levels, because if somebody does get sick, or a whole lot of people get sick, and it is the water, we are responsible for that. So we need to make sure that that follows all the processes as well. It's flash frozen, it depends on when it leaves the building at midnight, gets delivered, how long it sits out there in the sun. So it's quite a process in terms of making sure that that water is drinkable.
What is the best way to communicate? What is the best way to get behavioral change going? The psychology of behavior.
Athletes don't read.
I don't know who's going to kick off, David. I'm going to ask you to kick off, and I'll give each one of you a chance to respond to that.
I think it's, and this is where we as events need to work together. There is a certain crossover between running and cycling. There's no doubt, between mass participation sporting events, or what I term healthy outdoor lifestyle individuals, and it's a drip message. I mean, a year ago, I'm a cyclist with a running problem. I run, but my to-do blanket is having an extra sachet in my hand. I like to know that I've got that little thing of water that I carry with me. By the time I get to the next water station, it's now warm. And I used to just chuck it away and grab another one. I don't do that anymore. I've had to think about what I'm doing. And I think we need, as events, we need to be educating on an ongoing basis. It's not about one message. It's about numerous messages. It's that drip feed technology, drip feed theory. You've got to keep going at them, keep reminding them. I get very frustrated in running events at the way we as athletes behave. It's absolutely shocking. And it's not the event organizers, it's the athletes. It really is the athletes. We need to keep reinforcing the challenges we have to our local athletes. And Glenn mentioned it earlier, in fact everybody has. It's about educating those people that are coming into town and making sure that they're very aware of what it is. But it's just constant messaging until we get that change installed.
And I think it's every touch point, from your registration, the expo, everywhere where we have a connection with the runner. Social media platforms are a great form of communication, as much as it also does, and David was talking about, and you can talk about when you put out there about the water, how am I going to cool myself? What am I going to pour over my head? So it is that platform for people to vent, but it's certainly one way of getting it out there, and a very targeted communication directly with the runners.
Yeah, I think I concur completely. I think every drop counts across every form of comms platform that we have. I was saying behind the scenes just now that obviously we had to communicate to the runners that we were going to be quite stringent with regard to water and to use it wisely and so on and so forth. And the kind of negative feedback that we got, it was just unbelievable. I sat there and I was quite flabbergasted that people were so unconscious or unresponsible for their own behavior. They weren't taking responsibility for their own water usage. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but I can say to you that there were a lot of people that responded extremely negatively when we said we are reducing water, we are being very water conscious, use it wisely, etc., etc. And they kind of just expect that you must just produce. So I do concur in the sense that I think it's a collaborative approach, that if we have the same messages across all events, and I don't necessarily mean just the four of us, but all events talk the same language, talk the same communication across the same platforms, maybe at the end of the day we might be successful, and hopefully will be, in changing behavior.
I do have to feel for the Cape Town Marathon because they were the first to take the brunt of it and get the message out.
And it was an unusually hot day.
It was a seriously hot day.
So by the time we end up in March, I mean, already now in talking to people that are taking the corporate hospitality, the fact that there are no showers there hasn't been an issue. People, corporates are understanding that. In as much as that it's good behavior on our part to pull the showers out. Any corporate that's sitting at a major event like ours that has showers and is seen to have showers is going to be seen to be acting irresponsibly, and that's just not good for themselves.
When we put our task team together on the water issue, we very much identified two elements. So one was the element we can control, the operational, and the element we can't directly control, and that's the rider. And that's where our media marketing team were tasked to come up with a campaign that would actually tick all the boxes. And one, absolutely the drip process. Every rider com that goes out, we bring awareness to it. There's a visual guide that's going to go up within our race villages, which speaks to the proper use of water. And we're also investigating the shower solution, having timers put on the showers, as well as the music that plays the two-minute message or whatever it is. So it's an across-the-board approach that you have to take. Athletes, when they get to the event, are not focused on anything other than getting themselves from one side of the event to the other side of the event. So you have to put a message like this in front of them on as many platforms, social media, visual, hearing, as you can in order to bring the attention to it.
But Glenn, your challenge would be slightly different in that your event runs over 3 or 4 or 5 days, or what's it, 5 or 6 days. And of course, at the end of the day, guys are tired, they are dirty, they are whatever, they need a shower.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Absolutely. Our challenge, and actually that's on two fronts. One are the riders who've been out in the saddle, majority of them for 10 plus hours, depending on the stage. They need to have that shower. but you can shower within that period of time. And we need to draw attention to that. They don't need to sit in the shower for 2 hours after after their day stage. The other thing is we deal with a crew complement of over 1,000 people. Now we would be negligent if we didn't address the crew complement as well, because a number of those crew members come from environments where they don't have showers, they don't have running water. So for them coming on an Epic and suddenly having the luxury of a shower is something that they enjoy and they look forward to. We also have to be very cognizant of the education on that front to make sure our crew is then not overusing water and showers, facilities they would not normally have.
Yeah, thanks. I want to go to another part of the question, and that is the whole issue of events, tourism, job creation. And of course, water becomes very important in your events, as we've heard. The question I'm asking is, have you seen any of your participants, prospective participants, say, you know what, because, and I know probably Janet, you had the experience because you had the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon, and the other guys are, I think Dave, you'd be next up with the cycles.
Yeah.
I think so. Or the question I'm asking is, would there be a drop-off in participation because of stringent water restrictions or restrictions that you're going to have in your event, and that participants may feel, hang on, I'm not into this?
So from a cycle tour perspective, no. We don't believe that's, we haven't seen that effect. It certainly isn't a factor. Whereas major events, we're fortunate, our entries are all pre-entered. So we're able to create a 3 or 4 tier communication strategy. There's a communication strategy to the residents of Cape Town and the participants from Cape Town. There's a strategy that deals with folk that are living within South Africa, and then there's obviously a strategy dealing with international visitors coming into South Africa, because they're all understanding it very differently. But we haven't seen pushback, no. There were questions asked in the public domain by residents of the city of Cape Town, shouldn't you be cancelling this event because the tourists are going to come in here and they're going to bring 4,500 international participants, they're going to use up all our water. I mean, my answer to that, and I said this round the back, was at a point that we shut our airports and we stop tourism, there's no reason that we shouldn't be bringing cyclists in, provided we're taking care of them at the events. It's a week of events that we have, and making sure that we're not impacting there. Those hotels are going to be full. They're going to be full of either our cyclists, or they're going to be full of other tourists that have found an opportunity because the cyclists went there.
Yeah, and I echo Dave's sentiment there. We're also a pre-entry event, so we have the platform for education, we have the platform for making awareness. And I think, to be honest with you, with these events, there is a certain level of trust that's put into the event organizer by the participant. These are old events that have been around for long. They are delivered on a certain level, that even with the awareness that's going around water, there is a level of trust with your athlete or your customer to the event organizer that they will deliver what is required, even be it a minimum basis for a healthy delivery of the event.
We've asked about sustainability. We've spoken about green marathons and all those nice things. And how expandable are your events? I mean, have your events all reached maximum capacity? You know, is there space for it to grow? And should it grow, how does the water issue impact on that potential growth?
Should we deal with a small event on our right?
Yeah, great question, because we've just become part of a global series.
Yeah.
And the objective of that global series is to a degree to raise the level of participation in the Absa Cape Epic. However, we are cognizant of sustainability all the way around. Environmental sustainability, our impact on resources, our impact on the environment, the impact on the rider experience. So yes, that is something that certainly is taken into account when you look at the growth of your event. Will we be growing the Epic given these circumstances? We'll take a very careful look at whether and how big and how much bigger the Epic might get in the future. But it certainly is a decision that's made in collaboration with the current situation, with something like water, environment, areas we visit, the spectator experience, the rider experience. It's all forms an important part of what our event has become. We certainly wouldn't jeopardize that for growth.
And I think from our perspective is, I mentioned we were sold out on our ultra marathon, 11,000 runners in 2 days. We introduced a ballot system for our half marathon last year. We limited to 16,000 because of capacity. So it's not only the space of the roads, but it's the parking, it's the traffic, it's all the other impacts together with water, plastics, etc. We had over 26,000 applicants for the half marathon, so we're fortunate. We are sitting in that position, but we need to also balance that quality versus quantity issue. And we have a very real responsibility not only to our runners, but also to our partners and our sponsors. Once again, giving that experience, because sponsors aren't just involved in these events anymore from a branding perspective, but it's a whole bigger customer experience scenario.
I think Carol's hit the nail on the head. For years we've prided on being the largest time bicycle race in the world. That's just how it's happened. It was never by design. We limited the entries to the cycle tour in 1999 for the first time, and where we are now. And it isn't about being the biggest. It's actually about being the best experience. And the more people we try and squeeze on the road, the more the perception is going to be, you're just out to make money. I would rather, in fact, reduce the event in size and create an awesome experience that has people coming back year after year. That's where the value lies. There is, however, the school of thought. Two Oceans did it very successfully a number of years ago with the introduction of the half marathon. We see it with these runs every Saturday morning, the park runs. How do we get people active? So for many people, riding 100 k's on a bike is a big deal. There are a lot of people for whom that's just the bridge too far. So there's talk of possibly the introduction of a shorter route, which I think has been Two Oceans has just been absolutely incredible, because it's fed the ultramarathon to the extent that it's now just completely sold out. So there is room for expansion at our event, but in a sustainable way. I think that's the key.
I think, Janet, for you, I mean, obviously the three events have...
They're a little older than us.
Yeah, exactly, and they've got a brand of being so successful.
Yes.
Cape Town Marathon now
4 years.
starts up,
4 years.
and of course we all wish that it becomes highly successful. Where are your areas?
Yeah, well, I think, we've always stated it. Our two major objectives: one is to become the African major city marathon in the world, and secondly, the second one was obviously to use the event to leverage change. So those are the two elements that we kind of pegging our flag in the sand to say this is what we would like to achieve. With regard to the first one, there are 10 million city marathon runners around the world that generally choose one or two city marathons to run. So certainly our level of marathons, we've had a controlled growth. We've pegged each year with about a 25 to 30% growth. This last year we took 11,000 entries. Next year we're hoping to get the 15,000 or thereabouts. And certainly that is something that we're wanting to grow. Will the water issue have impact on that? Certainly, if we manage it effectively and we manage it responsibly, I don't think so. I do think that the key area is going to be the behavioral change. And I do concur completely that it has to be about the experience, the quality of the experience when people come to Cape Town to run or cycle or do whatever it is, to participate in an event, that they have a high quality participation. Yeah.
Of course, the last question I've got, and maybe it's a question which the government officials shouldn't ask, but given the fact that these events have been very successful for both the city and the province, are there any immediate, critical, urgent challenges with regards to the water security that you need help from government? We'll keep the script, guys. We'll keep the script.
I'm going to kick off and say we're exceptionally fortunate in the Western Cape. I work, as I think my colleagues do, with a number of events around South Africa and around the world. And we're fortunate here to have incredible relationships as events with provincial governments and with the city. And we have a very proactive group of people working in government. Do we need anything right now as an event? The support we get is phenomenal, and provided that support keeps coming, that's great. No, I think it's incumbent on us as events to lead the way. We need to be creative around how we're managing. It's not government's job to tell us how to manage our events. We're the event organisers. You guys are good at running government. But it's that collaboration and working together. So I think from a cycle perspective to the provincial government, the fact that we're sitting here discussing this is a government initiative. So that's a huge kudos to you guys.
I mean, we even to go check the surface of Chapman Speaker.
Don't.
Carol and Janet from the
I
marathon
think we
side.
completely agree, and it's an open line of communication. And I mentioned we've already had a water crisis workshop. We've planned how we're going to dovetail our comms as well. So when the city talk to specific groups, and over March it will be specifically from the West Road perspective to the concentration on the hotels, the B&Bs, all the accommodation facilities, the restaurants, and it's really planning together, which we all sitting here are very fortunate to experience. So once again, a big thank you for hosting events like this, bringing us closer together.
And keep doing what you do.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Janet Wellman, hey? Wellman. Carol Foster, David Valez, Glenn Bloomberg, all heading up enormously successful events and massive for the city and the province. Thank you very much. I know there's a chance for questions from the floor. Aiden, are you doing the...
You might as well.
Okay, so I'm gonna work for Aiden a little bit here. Any questions you've got for any of the panel members? Again, the rules is introduce yourself. I see a hand in the back. It says Bonnie. Yeah, so Bonnie in the back. But introduce yourself, where you're from, and who you're directing the question to.
I'm Bonnie Harman, Dutch Consul General, and I was wondering, have you ever thought about teaming up with the new technologies? You know, athletes are normally like obsessively looking at their watches. Me too. Not that I'm an athlete, but you can even you can measure moist and see how much water you actually need to drink during a match, which also educates people how much intake they should have instead of what they think they should have.
That's a great point, and one of our partners are Garmin, and we certainly are looking at modern technology and using that. We do have a few mountains and things that affect our connectivity, but we certainly must make use of that. Thank you.
That's a very good point, and the majority of athletes, as you say, are techno junkies, complete techno junkies, and that's certainly something that should be looked at in proactively.
Any other questions? Any marathon? Is there a question in front? I was going to say any marathon runner, but I don't know if we can just.
We're looking for an entry for 2 Oceans.
Thank you. I'm Hussein Isaacs. I'm the Director for Climate Change at the Western Cape Government. The question that I want to ask, or just to get some comment from you guys, on the communication side of things, I haven't heard about the punitive measures that you can use to change behavior. Just some comment. I know on the running scene, there's footage, and they have fined people. We've heard from the Volvo Ocean Race, where the city, I think that there's a bit of a white lie, where there's a fine if you use excessive water. Just your comment on that, please.
We introduced, the Two Oceans introduced a fining system for littering. It's not easy. You know, to monitor 30,000 odd roads, you almost have to have more marshals to prove it than anything else. But I think it's the concept. It's like us driving down the road and I get a fine for speeding and you don't. But you generally don't do it because you don't want to have a fine. Further to that, working together with WPA, it has now been included in the ASA rules. So once again, if we implement it all over the country, you know, we went and ran the Soweto Marathon, there were no bins, not one bin. So, you know, we can't expect people telling them, put your litter in the bin, where you can run another marathon in another province and you can do what you like. So, yes, it is a process. We also collaborate with the clubs to say we need your help to communicate with your runners. We can't do this on our own.
In terms of water use, it's a difficult one. It's up to us to control the impact of water use as it relates to the city of Cape Town, which is where we need to be fined as events if we're not taking control of what it is we're doing. When it comes to littering, as far as the cyclists is concerned, it's a zero tolerance approach. We, in fact, this past weekend at an event, 2 weekends ago, in Swillenburg, issued a 1,500 rand fine on the participant. We've realized that there are shortcomings in our own rules and regulations and how they're applied. And as you just said, Carol, it is very difficult because if a report comes in of littering
then you have to allow the person that's being reported to have their opportunity to have their say. There's a legal process that has to follow.
Especially if it's one of the elites or your potential winner.
In this particular instance, we have video footage of the lead bike that filmed him taking something and throwing it on the ground. We then applied the international regulations and that was fine. But that is absolutely key. So it's, from a cycler perspective, it's written into the rules. You may not litter, and there will now be a set of consequences based on actions that we can take against participants littering.
Okay. There's one question. I wasn't going to let the lady not have it, so...
My name is Mufa. I'm from My question with regards to the running scene and the water on the running scene. I recently ran my first marathon, the Cape Town Marathon, very well organized, it's up to you. My question around the water, and like the gentleman said, people having a running problem on a bicycle, he keeps that extra packet of water. I do exactly the same thing. It was my first marathon. You're running with an extra packet of water because you've been checking on Facebook all the time, there's going to be less water than there's going to be anything. But it seems like the people that have run before you, you see packets all over the place, not just the packets, but they seem to be taking showers with the water. So the behavioral change that needs to happen around that, and the possible punitive measures that needs to go with that as well. Because as a back rider, and because of the time restrictions on your race, you will have so many more novices that will be entering like myself. You have many people that run with an extra packet of water because they're scared that by the next time they come to the water station, there's nothing left for them. So what kind of punitive measures in relation to water, not just the littering on the ground, is there going to be in place for the companies?
Karen, Janet, short of having another police task running.
No, I think that's a very relevant question. As I indicated, we do believe that, and it's not based on scientific evidence, but we do have photos of runners, many, that may have 5 water sachets in their hands at any given stage. Some of them are squirting themselves and others are squirting over here. And so it is a behavioral change, and it's not, they're not using the water primarily for hydration, they're using the water for cooling. And we did do away with the cooling stations just because we felt that it was necessary in level 5 water restrictions for us to have cooling stations was not a good idea. But what we have initiated already, the investigation of doing a cooling station with non-potable water that then goes into a recyclable tank that then can be used elsewhere for an alternative, pre-water stations, and then include that in all the communication, that people don't use water in sachets to cool themselves, and that they understand where those cooling stations are. So that's one of them. A punitive measure is, as Carol is indicating, is a very, very difficult one, and not only to police, but to actually implement. You know, afterwards then you will have to have proper protocol with regard to hearing your side of the story versus our side of the story, and what I did to you, they will then say, but that person did the same thing in unfair practice, and so on and so forth. So I do think that punitive action is probably a very much more difficult process to implement. But if you can instigate behavioral change, and put pressure on other runners to enforce that behavioral change, I think that you'll be far more successful. But what I can say is, over the last 4 years which we've been involved with the marathon, I've taken pictures of all of our water stations when the bulk of the field is going through, pictures of what the water looks like and what the waste and the plastics look like, and there's huge improvement. So I do think that this is not a battle that we should give up on. I think that this is a battle that we just started, and runners are great people. You know, cyclists are great people. It's not that they don't want to, it's just that we need to kind of encourage, I think.
But also, Janet, sorry too, that what Glenn touched on too, that we almost forget, we have a huge amount of volunteers who help us, and to educate them as well, to say to them, don't freely give out the water, only hand out 1 or 2, and be more stringent with what we're handing out. So it's more difficult for a runner to grab 5 sachets. So it's both sides of the coin.
And believe me, in an ultra distance event, that is not an easy task to have somebody perform When you're 45 kilometers out in the bush, 35 degrees, and somebody tells you you can't get down.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I think.
But you can make them aware.
Yeah.
You know, they oops, I'll think
Well,
twice
you see,
about it.
now I can't get them to stop that. But, I think, guys, very, very important issues were raised in this panel session. Thank you very much to all of the panelists. I think the issue of behavioral economics, behavioral psychology change, that's the one takeout I think we're getting, and maybe for our comms people, Corin and the guys from the water team, something that we may need to think of how we can work together on those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.